full minute. My first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity won out. I suggested a coffee shop across town, far from anywhere the family would go. She responded immediately. Thanking me and asking if tomorrow worked, I agreed and put my phone down, wondering what she could possibly want to tell me. She walked into the coffee shop looking nervous, her eyes scanning the room before she spotted me. I waved her over and she slid into the booth across from me. Up close, I realized she was younger than I'd thought, maybe 25 to my 32. She had that fresh-faced look that made me understand why Natalie chose her. Easy to mold, easy to control. She ordered a tea and fidgeted with the menu while we waited. Then she started talking. She said she never wanted to come between Ryan and me. Natalie orchestrated the whole thing from the start. Ashley had just gotten divorced and moved back to town with no friends and no support system. Natalie befriended her immediately, invited her to everything, made her feel included. Then Natalie started mentioning her brother constantly, how great he was, how he needed someone kind and warm in his life. Ashley went along with it because Natalie was her only friend. She pulled out her phone and showed me text messages. Months of messages from Natalie coaching her on what to say to Ryan, how to act around him, what to wear to family events. Specific instructions about laughing at his jokes, asking about his work, bringing his favorite beer. I scrolled through them and felt sick. It was the same manipulation that had been used on me, just from a different angle. Natalie had been playing puppet master with both of us. I asked Ashley why she was showing me this now. She set her phone down and her hands were shaking slightly. She admitted she was scared of marrying into this family. Natalie had become more controlling as the wedding got closer. She was dictating every detail of the wedding plans, insisting they all needed to live near each other after the marriage, calling Ashley multiple times a day to check in. Ashley realized she wasn't gaining a husband. She was absorbed into Natalie's control system. She'd be another person Natalie managed and manipulated. The wedding was supposed to be in 4 months and Ashley was having panic attacks about it. She begged me not to tell Ryan about our meeting. She said Natalie would destroy her if she found out. I didn't promise anything, but I told her I understood her situation better than she probably realized. She was another victim of Natalie's manipulation, just one who happened to benefit from it at first. Now she was seeing the cost of that benefit. I felt unexpected sympathy for her. She wasn't the enemy I'd thought she was. She was just young and lonely and got caught in Natalie's web like everyone else. We finished our drinks and she left first, checking over her shoulder like she expected Natalie to appear. I called Emily Walton the next morning. She was a tenant rights attorney someone had recommended months ago when I first expanded my property portfolio. I needed to make sure I was handling everything with Natalie legally and ethically. Emily had me come to her office that afternoon. I brought all my documentation, every inspection report, every communication with Waverly, every notice sent to Natalie. Emily spread it all out on her conference table and went through each piece carefully. After an hour, she looked up and told me I'd been completely appropriate in my role as landlord. Everything followed standard procedures exactly. She advised me to maintain the professional distance and never let personal history influence any business decisions. I assured her that was exactly what I'd been doing. Everything went through Waverly. Everything was documented. Everything was by the book. Emily warned me that Natalie could potentially sue for harassment or discrimination if I treated her differently than other tenants. Even the appearance of personal motivation could cause legal problems. I told her that everything went through the property management company and followed their standard procedures exactly. I'd never given Natalie special treatment, good or bad. She was just another tenant in my building. Emily seemed satisfied but told me to document every single interaction meticulously going forward. Save every email, every call log, every inspection report. If Natalie ever tried to claim harassment, I'd need proof that everything was handled professionally. I thanked her and left feeling more confident about my approach. My accountant Gavin called that week about the quarterly review of my property portfolio. We went through each building's performance, discussing occupancy rates and maintenance costs. When we got to the downtown building, Gavin mentioned that Natalie's rent payments had been consistently on time every single month. She was actually a model tenant financially. Never late, never bouncing checks, never causing problems with payments. I realized that despite everything personal between us, she was giving me no legitimate business reason for complaint. She paid her rent. She followed her lease terms. She maintained the apartment properly. As a landlord, I couldn't ask for better. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who destroyed my marriage was now my most reliable tenant. 3 days later, Ryan showed up at my office without calling first. My assistant buzzed me saying someone was here to see me, and when I walked out to the lobby, there he was. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled shirt like he'd slept in it. He asked if we could talk about what really happened to our marriage. Thea had told him some things that made him question everything he thought he knew. I didn't want to rehash old pain, didn't see the point of going over everything again, but something in his face, the way he looked lost and tired, made me agree to dinner that evening. He left and I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work, wondering what Thea had said to him. That evening we met at a quiet restaurant across town, the kind of place where tables were far enough apart for private conversations. Ryan ordered a beer, I got wine, and we sat in awkward silence for a minute before he started talking. He'd been thinking a lot since finding out I owned Natalie's building. The coincidence had made him look at other things differently, made him question what else he'd missed. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling, then turned it toward me. Text messages from Natalie. Dozens of them over the past 6 months. I leaned closer and read them. Messages celebrating that I wasn't at family dinners anymore. Messages about how much better everything was without me there. Detailed plans about seating arrangements to put Ashley next to Ryan. Strategy sessions about topics Ashley should bring up. Stories she should tell. It was all there. Written out in Natalie's own words, proof of everything I'd tried to tell him during our marriage. Ryan's hands shook as he scrolled through more messages. His face looked crushed, like he was seeing his sister for the first time. He kept saying he couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe he'd been so blind. I watched him process what I'd been trying to show him for years. He apologized then. Really apologized. Not the defensive sorry he'd given during our marriage when I complained about Natalie, but a real apology that acknowledged what he'd done wrong. He said he was sorry for not believing me, for choosing his sister over his wife, for letting Natalie destroy what we had. He looked at me across the table and asked if there was any chance for us, any way to fix this. I appreciated the apology. I really did. It felt good to finally be heard and believed. But I told him the truth, that it was too late. Some things break so completely they can't be put back together. He was engaged to someone else now, building a life with Ashley. I'd moved on too, built a new life without him. He nodded slowly, accepting my answer even though I could see it hurt. Then I told him about my conversation with Ashley, about her concerns regarding Natalie's control over their relationship. He sat back in his chair looking surprised. He admitted he'd noticed Ashley getting quieter as the wedding got closer, more anxious and withdrawn. She'd stopped making decisions about the wedding, just agreed with whatever Natalie suggested. I suggested he talk to Ashley honestly about what kind of marriage they wanted, separate from his sister's input. He needed to figure out if Ashley was marrying him or marrying into Natalie's plan. We finished dinner and went our separate ways. I drove home feeling strange, like I'd closed a door that had been hanging open for months. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was making coffee. I didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. Natalie's voice came through, high and angry, practically screaming. She knew I'd had dinner with Ryan. How dare I try to destroy her family? I was a bitter ex-wife who couldn't move on. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. I was poisoning Ryan against her. She went on, her voice getting louder and more unhinged with each accusation. I didn't interrupt, just let her rant until she finally ran out of words. Then I hung up without saying anything, and saved the voicemail she'd left earlier that I hadn't listened to yet. It was 3 minutes of similar accusations. Even worse than the phone call. I forwarded it to Emily Walton with a brief explanation. Emily called back within an hour saying this was exactly the kind of harassment that justified a cease and desist letter. She'd draft one immediately. Everything had to go through proper channels now. No more direct contact from Natalie. That afternoon, Waverly called with an update. Natalie had shown up at the property management office demanding to break her lease early and move out immediately. Waverly had calmly explained the financial penalties for breaking a lease. Showed her the terms she'd signed. Natalie had gotten upset, raising her voice, claiming she was forced out of her home. Waverly had remained professional, explaining that Natalie was welcome to stay through her lease term, or leave according to the terms she'd agreed to. The choice was hers, but the penalties were standard and applied to all tenants equally. I thanked Waverly for handling it so well. After we hung up, I sat at my desk looking at all the documentation I'd accumulated. The inspection reports, the lease violations that had been corrected, the payment history, now the voicemail and Emily's cease and desist letter. I realized Natalie was spiraling because she'd lost control of the story she'd been telling. For the first time in her life, she was facing real consequences that her tears and manipulation couldn't fix. She couldn't cry her way out of a legal lease. She couldn't make me the bad guy when everything was documented and professional. The power balance had flipped completely, and she didn't know how to handle it. Later that week, my phone rang again. This time it was Emily, Ryan's mother. I almost didn't answer because I couldn't imagine why she'd be calling me. She'd never accepted me as Ryan's wife, never even tried. But curiosity won, and I picked up. She started talking immediately, demanding I stop harassing Natalie. Her daughter was upset, couldn't sleep, was forced from her home by my vendetta. If I didn't leave Natalie alone, she'd take legal action. I let her finish her threats, then calmly explained I was a landlord conducting normal business. If she had concerns about the property management, she should contact the company directly. Emily didn't like that answer at all. She started listing everything wrong with me as a wife. I was cold, unfriendly, didn't make enough effort with the family. I never cooked the right foods for holidays. I didn't understand their traditions. I'd isolated Ryan from his family. On and on she went. Every complaint she'd apparently been storing up for 6 years. I let her talk herself out completely, waiting until she finally paused for breath. Then I asked if she was finished. She made a surprised sputtering sound, clearly not expecting me to respond that calmly. I told her that her opinion stopped mattering to me the day the divorce was finalized. Then I ended the call and blocked her number. An hour later, Thea called, laughing so hard she could barely talk. Emily was calling everyone in the family, ranting about my disrespect and rudeness. Thea said it was the best thing she'd ever heard, that someone had finally stood up to Emily's bullying. She invited me to lunch the next week, saying there were things about the family I should know, things that would help me understand why Natalie turned out the way she did. The next week, I met Thea at a small restaurant downtown, one of those places with outdoor seating and good sandwiches. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 iced teas ordered. She stood up and hugged me, which surprised me because we'd never been that close during my marriage. We sat down and made small talk for a few minutes about the weather and the menu, but I could tell she had things she wanted to say. After we ordered, she leaned forward and started talking. She told me that Natalie's manipulation didn't start with me. It went back years to when their father left. Natalie was 12 when he walked out and Emily fell apart completely. She cried all the time, couldn't get out of bed, stopped cooking and cleaning. Natalie stepped in to take care of everything, managing the house and looking after Ryan, who was only 6. But more than that, Natalie learned she could control Emily's emotions. If she was sweet and helpful, Emily felt better. If she pulled back, Emily got worse. It gave Natalie power she'd never had before, and she used it. Ryan became her project after that, someone she could shape and control from the beginning. She'd tell him what to think, who to be friends with, how to act. Emily encouraged it because Natalie was so good at keeping the family together. Thea watched it happen but couldn't stop it. She tried to talk to Emily about giving the kids space to grow up normally, but Emily shut her out for not supporting the family. Thea said she watched Natalie sabotage Ryan's relationships all through high school and college. There was a girl named Jessica in college who Ryan really loved, but Natalie convinced him Jessica was using him for money. Another girl named Maria got the same treatment, with Natalie crying to Ryan about how Maria didn't respect family values. The pattern was always the same. Natalie would find something wrong with every girl, work on Ryan until he believed it, then comfort him through the breakup. She'd been doing it for over 15 years by the time I came along. Thea pulled out her phone and showed me notes she'd been keeping, dates and details of every relationship Natalie had destroyed. She'd documented it all, hoping someone would eventually hold Natalie responsible. I asked Thea why she was telling me this now, after staying quiet through my whole marriage. She said because I was the first person who had actual power to do something about it. By owning Natalie's building, I disrupted her sense of control in a way that couldn't be manipulated away. Natalie couldn't cry her way out of a lease or make me the bad guy when everything was legal and documented. Thea saw this as the chance to finally break the toxic pattern that had controlled their family for years. She wanted me to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with, that this wasn't just about me or my marriage. It was about decades of manipulation that had hurt everyone in the family. My phone rang while we were finishing lunch. It was Waverly calling with an update. I excused myself and stepped outside to take it. Waverly told me that Natalie had called the office that morning to say she'd be staying through her lease term after all. She wouldn't be breaking the lease early, but she'd already given notice that she wouldn't renew when it expired in 6 months. Waverly said Natalie sounded different on the phone, quieter and less demanding than before. She seemed defeated in a way Waverly hadn't seen in their previous interactions. I thanked Waverly for the update and told her to continue treating Natalie exactly like any other tenant. 6 months of professional landlord-tenant relationship I could handle easily. When I got back to the table, Thea was paying the check. She asked if everything was okay, and I told her about Natalie's decision to stay, but not renew. Thea smiled and said it was probably the first time in Natalie's life she couldn't control the outcome of a situation. 3 days later, Ryan texted me asking if we could meet again. His message said he'd been in therapy and learning about family enmeshment and manipulation. He wanted to talk about what he was discovering. I agreed to meet for coffee, curious about what therapy was teaching him. We met at a coffee shop near his new apartment, and I barely recognized him when he walked in. He looked healthier somehow, his face less stressed and his eyes clearer than I'd seen them in years. We got our drinks and sat down, and he started talking immediately. He told me his therapist had given him books to read about enmeshed families and emotional manipulation. Everything he was learning described his relationship with Natalie perfectly. He'd started seeing how she'd controlled him his whole life, making decisions for him disguised as protective concern. The therapy was helping him understand that what he thought was a close sibling bond was actually unhealthy dependence that Natalie had created and maintained. He'd confronted her about some of it, and she'd cried and said he was abandoning the family just like their father did. That manipulation had always worked before, but this time Ryan recognized it for what it was. Ryan told me he'd postponed the wedding indefinitely. He and Ashley needed to figure out their relationship without Natalie's influence hanging over everything. Ashley had moved to her own apartment across town, and they were dating properly for the first time, without Natalie orchestrating every interaction. He was also setting boundaries with his mother, telling her he needed space and wouldn't be attending every family event. Emily was furious about it, calling him selfish and ungrateful. The whole family was in chaos because Ryan was finally standing up for himself. I felt proud of Ryan for doing the work, for finally seeing what I'd tried to show him for years. But I was also clear with him that this didn't change anything between us. Our marriage was over, and his growth now didn't erase the years of pain he'd caused by choosing his sister over me. Ryan nodded and said he understood completely. He wasn't asking for another chance or trying to get back together. He just wanted me to know that he finally saw the truth about what had happened to us. He said he was sorry for all the years he'd dismissed my concerns and made me feel crazy for seeing what was right in front of us. He took responsibility for the divorce, for not protecting our marriage, for letting Natalie destroy what we had. I accepted his apology and told him I hoped he and Ashley could build something healthy together. We finished our coffee and said goodbye, and I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. 2 days after my meeting with Ryan, I woke up to find a long email from Natalie in my inbox. It was pages of text about how I was destroying her family and ruining her brother's happiness. She accused me of manipulating Ryan against her, of using my position as his landlord to control his life, of being vindictive and cruel. She said I'd never understood their family bond, and I was jealous of how close they were. The email went on, listing every way I'd supposedly wronged her and demanding I leave them all alone. I read it once, then forwarded it to Emily Walton without responding. Emily called me an hour later and said she'd send Natalie a formal cease and desist letter. The email was clearly harassment, and Emily wanted it on record that Natalie needed to stop all direct contact with me. Everything had to go through proper legal or business channels from now on. Emily sent the letter that afternoon, and after that, the direct contact from Natalie finally stopped.